Tonight we'll be talking to Graham Hunter about the start of the La Liga season, wins for both Real Madrid and for Barcelona, but that transfer window still has a week or two to go before it closes. And on top of that as well, we'll be talking 25 years of Kick It Out, what they've done, what they've got left to do, and lots more with David Conn from The Guardian. And the 25th year anniversary is actually being celebrated tonight as well of Kick It Out. So David will be joining us very, very shortly indeed. But first, Ireland's new home of European football, Virgin Media Sport, kick off their coverage of the Champions League and Europa League on the 18th of September. Graeme Souness is of course part of their punditry team. He was in town earlier to help launch the service, and our own Maura Trasny Kelly managed to grab a few minutes with Mr. Souness.
So joined by Graeme Souness, and I suppose one of the first things I want to ask you is, you've already spoken before about how players seem to be dictating dressing rooms too much now, and management and stuff, and the stuff we're seeing in Manchester United going on at the moment. What would your opinion be on that?
There's obviously, games evolved. The dressing room, the players have a far bigger say in what goes on today than ever before. I think what I do would encourage them to have an opinion more. You know, what we pundits talk about. But the world's changing. I don't think it's the only workplace where that relationship has changed, where the employees have more of a say. I think Man United have a problem right now. It's not a happy ship. They have a player who would appear to want away from there, and you've got a manager who's now seems to be having a very difficult relationship with his directors. So 2 games in, there's talk of him losing his job. That should not even be a conversation. They finished second last year, but I think the damage they've done to themselves is self-inflicted. When you look at, Pogba making noises before a ball's kicked about wanting to go to Barcelona, if not him, certainly his agent, and the agent wouldn't be saying that unless he had it okay from the player. And then the manager falling out with his bosses because he wasn't getting the players he wanted. So they go to Brighton at the weekend, having won their first game, go to Brighton, lose, and now all the criticism, all the focus is on them, and a lot of it is self-inflicted.
You could argue, to be devil's advocate, the bosses are probably saying, well, you've had enough money, you've done enough, now it's time for you to work with what you have and stop whining publicly.
That's exactly how it's panned out. He bought Lindelof and he bought Bale, and they spent a lot of money on those two, and then he wants another centre-half, and you've also got Jones and another England centre-half there. So you've got 4 centre-halves to choose from, and you want to buy another one. And I can understand the frustrations that the board would feel at that. But I think the way Mourinho's gone about it, it's allowed people to look at the situation and stir the pot up for them. Man United right now are the focus of lots of negative publicity, and I think the manager is to blame for some of it, and Pogba and his agent have something to blame for it. 2 games in, and you talk about a manager losing his job. It's ridiculous.
Does that infect the dressing room as well then? Oh
yeah, and some. If I'm a player in that dressing room and there's someone obviously wanting to leave, I'm not happy with him. 2 games in, when you should be buzzing, excited about what's coming down the track, it's all negativity surrounding Man United. That's not what they need or what they want right now, 2 games in.
One team that has had a very good run the last few seasons under Jurgen Klopp is, of course, Liverpool, your own alma mater. Now, has the time come for Jurgen to actually deliver some silverware?
Yeah, well, the minute you walk through the door at Liverpool, you're expected to get trophies. But I think now, I'm slightly surprised that they're not sort of playing up their potential to win something. It's all about, no, we're not ready, we're not. Well, I think they are ready. I think they've got a really good team, and they have a squad as well, not just a starting 11. So I can see them coming close, if not winning something this year. Get the new goalkeeper will improve them greatly if he is a real deal. I think he looks like it so far. Got more midfield players to choose from now, slightly different types, maybe more creative types than the workaholics they have in Henderson, Wijnaldum and James Milner. And you got that front 3 that will cause anyone problems. So I think Liverpool are particularly strong. But I emphasise, it's not just the starting 11. They've got some strength and depth now. So I think when you look at them, I think this could be the start of a decade where they could be winning trophies on a regular basis.
The noises they have been making about how we're not ready, we're still working towards it.
By that.
Yeah, I was wondering, is that maybe a public thing they're trying to do to dampen down expectations, or do they actually believe it themselves? Which they do, you'd be kind of worried.
No, I think quietly they'll really fancy themselves. I get playing down the optimism that your supporters feel because you've gone out and signed big players in the season you had last year, but they also want to hear the manager say we're ready. They also want to hear, now's our time. And I get it from the manager's point of view that you're preparing them for the disappointment, but also I've worked in Liverpool, they want to believe they're the team now, and I think the manager really believes it, but he chooses to go down a different road to the one I would go down. I'd be exceptionally optimistic about their chances this year.
The trouble is, of course, they're in the Premier League with Man City being in the way they are in recent seasons. If Liverpool, say, were to finish second to them, would that be seen as a failure?
Well, they've not won anything for a long time, Liverpool. They finished in second to Man City, which would be most people's opinion. I think for Man City to win it, they're going to have to finish in front of Liverpool. I think they'll be the two outstanding teams this year, given the football they play and how easy they find it is to score goals. Liverpool, hopefully, with Van Dijk coming last year and a new goalkeeper, will stop conceding as many goals. I think we witnessed a bit of that at Crystal Palace, that they can dig results out. Would it be a success or a failure? I would take it as success. I think, if you're getting to the final of a European Cup, or maybe win a League Cup or a FA Cup, finish second, have a decent run, semi-final, final of the Champions League, yeah, that would be success. But ultimately, Liverpool have to win trophies. They've been a club that's always done that. Maybe they've been short on that in recent years, but they've always been a club that the supporters got used to winning lots of trophies.
Finally, we're here because we are talking about European competitions. If I was to ask you to get your crystal ball out now, who will be in the Champions League final?
Liverpool and Man City.
Why would you say that?
I think we saw from Madrid last week when they lost to Atletico, their football's still great. From the goalkeeper all the way through to the last third. The football was fabulous, kept it, had more of the ball than Atletico, but they were missing Ronaldo. That game changer, the ultimate game changer. So I see them in transition. I think Barcelona is so reliant on Messi. If he's not at it and he's not enjoying a good night, then they could find it difficult against the better teams. Atletico will be a different team. I think they've still got that ridiculous work ethic, which everyone takes part when they haven't got the ball. So they'll be a handful. I think Bayern Munich, who for me were better than Real Madrid in the two games they played Madrid last year. So they could be a threat again. But I just see those two, City and Liverpool, the brand of football, the quality they have, and the strength and depth, stand them in good stead in both the Premier League and the Champions League.
There you go. It's Graeme Souness who was speaking to our own Maura Trasny-Kelly earlier on today at the launch of Virgin Media Sport, kicking off their Champions League and Europa League coverage, which will be coming your way on the 18th of September. Kick It Out celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. We'll be speaking to David Conn about this anniversary on the way next.
Football on Off the Ball.
In association with the faster than ever Boyle Sports app, with hundreds of pre-live and in-play football markets. Download it now. Boyle Sports. Time to play.
Jess Kelly.
Coming up this week, we look at alternatives to flashy high-end phones. From the revived Nokia 3310 to the new Moto G6, we'll have recommendations for durable, affordable devices. And of course, we'll answer your tech questions.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Download the podcast on Friday from noon or tune in Sunday at 6.
On News Talk.
Almost. Yep, nearly. There. Told you. See? They do fit.
But can you actually walk, Jim?
I'll just breathe in.
Not everything is such a tight squeeze. Volkswagen Financial Services offers PCP, hire purchase and leasing options. So whatever vehicle you want to drive, you'll find a finance choice that fits comfortably. To find out more, visit your local authorised Volkswagen, Audi, Seat, Skoda or Volkswagen commercial vehicle retailer or visit vwfs.ie/PCP. PCP and hire purchase are offered by Volkswagen Bank GmbH Branch Ireland, authorised by the Federal Financial Supervisory Authority in Germany and regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules. Terms and conditions apply.
That's the sound of children playing in a muddy field. This doesn't bother Aaron, as he purchased the 10 kg Hoover washing machine from Harvey Norman, recommended by our expert staff as its large capacity is perfect for endless piles of muddy clothes. Aaron got this washing machine at a great price of €329, saving him €100. Remember, at Harvey Norman, we guarantee we'll beat everyone's prices on home appliances.
Go! Off the ball. This is News Talk.
And you're welcome back to the football show. Still to come, Graeme Hunter on the start of the La Liga season and loads more besides. Just a reminder, Celtic drawing 1-1 earlier on in Seduva in the Europa League, while a 3-1 defeat for Burnley, who ended up at 10 men tonight. Ben Gibson sent off as Sean Dyche's side went down 3-1 away to Olympiacos. Now, this week marks the 25th anniversary of the formation of Kick It Out, originally formed as Let's Kick Racism Out of Football, an important organisation in the realm of English football over the course of the last quarter century. To mark its anniversary, Lord Owsley, who's been in charge since its inception, has been speaking a lot, particularly to the Guardian's own David Conn, who joins us on the line. Evening, David.
Hi.
Good to speak to you. It's hard to imagine that we both in our lifetime lived in a world where an organisation battling discrimination and racism, etc., in football didn't exist. I mean, the important work that Kick It Out have done over the past quarter century is almost immeasurable.
Yeah, but, you know, for as I said in my piece in The Guardian, for football fans of a certain age, just the realisation that it has been 25 years was a bit of a, it was a bit, I know you wouldn't believe it with my hairstyle and my new white beard, but...
It's a good hairstyle, David.
I like to think of myself as a young man, you know, and when I realised that Kick It Out, I mean, you know, because obviously I can remember the bad old days of being in English football grounds with the sort of, you know, outright racist abuse reverberating right around the ground that now seems absolutely unbelievable. But yeah, you know, but it still feels almost like a recent campaign that had to be stamped out. And so to realise that they've been going 25 years, it's an absolutely magnificent effort. You know, there is obviously a long way to go. There's other work that they have to do. There's other kinds of discrimination, and obviously we're dealing with, racism on the rise again in Britain, and Brexit. The Brexit Leave campaign having fueled so much of that. So there's work for them to do, but still, I mean, the work they've done has been absolutely magnificent.
We say 25 years almost seems like a long time. In another breath, it seems like no time at all when you consider the length of time that would have gone on beforehand, from the rise of black players throughout the leagues and maybe the mid-70s, late 70s onwards, to get up to 1991. It took until the Football Offences Act to actually be passed into law, which made indecent or racial chanting an illegal offence. Then 2 years later, obviously, Let's Kick Racism Out of Football was born with Lord Owsley at its helm. It's a remarkable thing, and they've done a lot of remarkable work, but as you mentioned, there's still a lot more to do. And we're looking into this today, like the reported cases of discrimination on the rise. They say 2018 saw a spike in reported racial, homophobic and other discrimination, with 282 cases reported, a 59% increase on figures from 2016-17. Now, there's two ways looking at those figures. It could be just a case of increased reporting, or sadly, which would be the worry, is that these actual instances are themselves on the rise.
Yeah, and what I think you've always got to remember is that is just the incidents that have been reported to Kick It Out. So it's people who are literally in a stadium and somebody says something or does something, and they've got the app, because there is a reporting app, and they report it. And you've got to think, I mean, it's absolute fact that it's going to be a tiny minority of cases that get reported like that. And there was another piece of work that Kick It Out did, which I reported on probably 2 years ago now. And this was more of a trawl of social media. So it wasn't what's been reported to Kick It Out. It was a trawl of racist abuse. Maybe it was more than 2 years ago, because Mario Balotelli was one of the most abused, and so was Daniel Sturridge. And it was racial abuse on social media of black players. And the figure for that was absolutely astonishing. I wrote it up. People can find it if they just Google it. But it was, from memory, it was in the hundred. It was more than 100,000 in a very short period, like 8 months. it was thousands and thousands and thousands of horrible racist abuse on social media. So it's there. And, to be honest, I pushed Herman Ousley quite a lot in that conversation about the Brexit context. And I sensed that he was trying to be quite diplomatic about it. But he did acknowledge that, he said himself, a lot of lies were told in the campaign. The campaign, as I'm sure you know, was fueled by anti-immigrant rhetoric, which a lot of it just borders on racism, doesn't it, and discrimination. It's all in the same territory. And, it's incredibly sad to think, Kick It Out and what they've achieved in football, they didn't stamp out racism themselves completely. And Piara Power, who was the national coordinator, also did some fantastic work to Kick It Out. He acknowledged that there's a wider cultural change that's gone on around society. And he said that in the 80s, as a member of an ethnic minority himself, you expected to get abuse, you expected to get, possibly attacked. You were singled out. It was right there in your face. And there has been a wider cultural change, a wider, if you like, acceptance of that we're in a multicultural society, a celebration of it. And it hasn't obviously just been a football thing, but the way that football grounds have changed in this way is such a distilled example of something so hateful being almost entirely stamped out. To feel that it's on the rise again, is incredibly depressing. And so that's why I said in my piece, that they've still got work to do, and I hope and trust that they'll be playing their part in, making sure that, or doing their best to make sure that the atmosphere that we've got now doesn't start getting anything like as toxic as it was back then.
It seems a perverse thing to think that in the, obviously we've got Brexit on one hand, the rise of the far right across Europe and whatever else might be going on in the United States at the moment. We still have an organisation that's combating discrimination in football. It still goes on, as we found out. The online numbers, as you mentioned, they're absolutely horrendous, and you just have to see if a player of colour happens to say anything, not even outside of the box. It's an instant reaction. The anonymity of the crowd, the anonymity of an online account, in the same way that somebody would have been packed into a terrace 25, 30 years ago, would have felt that they were safe to kind of throw that abuse, quote unquote safe, I say, to throw that abuse. The anonymity of online has added to that a little bit as well. But we're now, it's all enveloping a product in the Premier League that is almost entirely dependent on immigrants.
Yeah.
It just seems to me a slightly weird, bizarre situation that we would still have to combat something when you have a league that is entirely dependent on people from other cultures, other countries coming in and playing their trade there in England.
Absolutely agree with you. I just think there's a massive disconnect there because, 52% of people voted for Brexit, voted to leave. And, whatever people say, a very big, major reason for that, all the polling shows was an anti-immigrant feeling. And if 52% of people voted for Brexit, I don't think there's been polling of football fans, but, I think we can assume that, let's call it 52-48 of football fans. It might be more either way, but certainly a large number of football fans will have voted for Brexit. And there they are watching, English football, which is, for all the things that we criticise, the over-commercialism, the clubs, and, the corporate nature of the clubs for, the actual football, the football that's played is, beyond anyone's dreams from the 1970s and 1980s. Now watching, as you say, this multinational, multicultural game where overt racism in the stadium has been really, really effectively stamped out. And to be honest, many of the supporters themselves, as they call it, self-policing, it's not acceptable anymore. It's not just that you might get reported or, Kick It Out have had the campaign. The scale of Kick It Out's success with their campaign is that it's not acceptable in the stands, and everybody pretty much knows that when they go to the stadium. And yet, in the outside world, whipping up, hatred and resentment of immigrants was very, very effective. And, a large number of football fans must have gone into that ballot box and put a cross against leave.
You've obviously been speaking to Herman Ousley a lot about its formation and the intervening 25 years. There have been setbacks along the way for Kick It Out, not least surrounding the Anton Ferdinand, John Terry scenario that went on about 6-7 years ago now at this stage. Rio Ferdinand, in the wake of that as well, hit out a Kick It Out, calling them weak for their stance at the time that they took. They have taken knocks along the roads in these 25 years as well.
Well, that was the most challenging time that they had. The knocks that they had before that, in the years before that, Herman Ousley and Piara Power were reminding me just what a struggle it was, which again seems hard to believe now, to have clubs actually cooperate with them and to take it seriously and to bother about it as an issue. And to be honest, I remember that from the bad old days. So I remember being at games where there was vile abuse of black players and it not being mentioned at all on Match of the Day. And it just never seemed to be mentioned. It was a dominant experience in a lot of grounds. I spoke to Gareth Crooks about it. At The Guardian, we did an event about racism in football. Sol Campbell spoke and Gareth Crooks spoke, and we were talking about it beforehand. And Gareth said to me, I just don't want to talk about the bad old days. I don't want to talk about what it was like playing for Stoke City when I was first coming through, because it's too painful. And we didn't ask Gareth to talk about it. And that's how awful it was in those days. And so Kick It Out had a struggle to get clubs to acknowledge it and deal with it and acknowledge it as an issue, and then became very, very well established. And it was actually quite a shock in that period, 2012, when you had the John Terry, Anton Ferdinand case and the Suarez, Patrice Evra case, where suddenly black players themselves were making a stand against Kick It Out, arguing that, because Kick It Out is funded by the Premier League, the FA and the PFA, so arguing that, well, it's an establishment organisation that has not achieved enough. I did put that to Herman Ousley and asked him about it, and he said it was a really difficult time for them. I remember a strong feeling myself at the time that, hang on a minute, about the black player, the players, hang on a minute, you're attacking the one organisation here that's done so much work over the years. Are you sure this is the right target? And it was interesting because Herman Ousley said there were a lot of people working for Kick It Out who felt that, they felt very upset that it was their organisation that was being criticised. But he said that he took it on the chin from Jason Roberts. He didn't necessarily take Rio Ferdinand's criticisms, I have to say, but from Jason Roberts, who was arguing that the lack of black coaches, the lack of opportunities for black coaching there was far too few and there was far too little being done, and therefore he didn't want to kind of celebrate Kick It Out's Day of Action, because that would be like, for him, approving of the efforts football were making. And Herman Ousley said he had a good conversation with him and he accepted some of the criticism, and actually perhaps that helped, because with certain battles won, they have refocused on that issue about trying to have more black coaches and managers employed, more people from ethnic minorities and other minorities in administrative positions in football, being more diverse, promoting cohesion. These are Herman Ousley's new buzzwords, and it's almost because I think I've said in the piece it's more optimistic, because it's because all that vile abuse that we can hardly believe we witnessed now is pretty much finished, receding into the past, in terms of in the stadium at least, and they can focus on actual, on diversity and on having more black players properly participating at a senior level in the running of the game. It's obviously a wider scope that Kick It Out have now to battle all kinds of prejudice that they might find in the game. One of the areas that a lot of people would seem that hasn't been much progress made is in the area of homophobia. When you consider that to count the number of high-profile gay footballers that we've seen, you can still do it on one hand. That's got to be a worry from their perspective, to try and foster an environment, I guess, where a footballer, and God knows they have to exist,
can come out and do so with a certain degree of safety, I suppose.
Well, I mean, they must exist, and obviously we've had footballers who've come out after they've retired, so by definition, they do exist. And this is a whole new front, if you like, of anti-discrimination. And you do describe Kick It Out now as, rather than just being an anti-racism campaign, you describe them as being an anti-discrimination campaign, and it's discrimination of all kinds. Also focusing on women, on sexism against women, but also on encouraging more women to be involved in football. And so, they are campaigning on all these fronts. They're campaigning for greater diversity, for, as he kept saying, more he said cohesion so many times. It was very, very clear that he wanted me to get that message across and use that in the piece. And I just always feel about Kick It Out that, as I say, I was a teenager in the 70s. So, in some of those situations, and one that I can really, really always remember in particular, it was absolutely horrifying. And it was also I found it disturbing and scary. And when you think of the numbers of people in the stadium that were, not all the time, but just at times when it got excessive, and to think that they haven't done it just themselves, obviously, but they've played a major role. And as I said, they've performed. The work they've done represents a magnificent achievement, I think. And so, yes, of course, there are ongoing challenges, and fair play to them for taking them on. But 25 years is I think it's a time to really celebrate the work they've done and the positive change that they've brought about.
Absolutely. David Conn from The Guardian, thanks so much for taking out to speak to us this evening. Graeme Hunter's on the way next.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
A Taste of Donegal celebrates its 10th anniversary. A mouth-watering 3-day food and drink festival takes place Friday 24th to Sunday 26th of August. Wind your wild Atlantic way up to the pier in Donegal town and taste the finest food and drink in the country. Featuring celebrity chefs, kids entertainment, live music and fireworks. Visit atasteofdonegal.com. Supported by Donegal County Council.
When you're a first-time buyer, it's first things first. So when finding a great low fixed rate is all that matters right now, Ulster Bank's new First 5 mortgage has you sorted. We've 5 great benefits, including the lowest 2-year fixed rate in the market. Just search Ulster Bank First 5. Ulster Bank. Help for what matters. Lowest rate claim source bonkers.ie, 29th of June 2018. Maximum loan to value is 90%. Security and insurance required. Product fees may apply. Over 18s and residential mortgages only. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Credit facility subject to repayment and financial status. Warning, your home is at risk if you do not keep up payments on a mortgage or any other loan secured on it. Warning, if you do not meet the repayments on your loan, your account will go into arrears. This may affect your credit rating, which may limit your ability to access credit in the future. Warning, you may have to pay charges if you pay off a fixed rate loan early. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The Debenhams Spectacular event. Up to 30% off throughout the store and up to 15% off beauty and fragrance. Shop now in store and at debenhams.ie.
Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
Yes, joined on the line, as we are usually at this time of week, by Mr. Graeme Hunter. The La Liga season started with something of a whimper, it must be said. Nothing really out of the ordinary among the opening day results. Barcelona being Alaves 3-0, Real Madrid comfortable 2-0 winners at home to Getafe. Valencia and Atletico Madrid, they drew 1 apiece, while Sevilla picked up a 4-1 victory away to Rayo Vallecano. As I say, Graeme, with your lovely dandies hat on you tonight, it's wonderful, it's marvellous. Look
Richie, I love you so much because you've asked me, not allowed me.
Go on.
Asked me to put on my dandy's hat with my 1903.
I insist that
take that whimper back. What brother are you talking about? Let me just tiptoe through the tulips quickly with me here. Will you? Okay, Leo Messi hits the bar twice. First free kick, beautiful, top corner. Bounces off the bar, second free kick, daisy cutter. Gorgeous goal. 6,000th goal. Richie, who scored the 5,000th goal for Football Club Barcelona? Leo Messi. Who scores the 5,000th league goal for a club and then scores the 6,000th and either creates or scores 50% of the 1,000 in between? I'll just, amongst the tulips, I'll just leave you with that one now. Now, at the VAR, when we finally get video ahead of the Premier League, the Liga gets VAR. Andre Silva arrives, scores this beautiful hat-trick. The third one's taken away from him. They look at it again on VAR. They decide that it was a goal that had to be given, and it's given, and they were right. VAR in all its multi-throbbing, splendiferous beauty. Okay, Real Madrid was a little bit of a walk through the gears. That was fine, I agree with you, except let's just throw a little side bomb in there. Rafa Varane, widely acclaimed as the number one defender in the entire world, gets left on the bench. Nacho isn't a regular for Spain, even steps in as man of the match. You leave out the number one defender in the world and you don't even notice. And I'll just finish with Levante going to Betis and winning 3-0. And a guy who wasn't a professional footballer until he was 24 years old, El Comandante, the commander, Morales, scores a goal where he runs 3 quarters of the pitch, puts 5 players on their backsides and scores off the outside of his right foot. Richie, if that's your version of a whimper, I'd hate to hear you roaring.
I'm standing by a whimper here, Graeme. We'll start with the Bernabeu, because I guess there's a lot of different strands that we can take from that game. Obviously, Julen Lopetegui's first game in charge of Real Madrid in La Liga, at least. So we wanted to get a decent sense of what a Lopetegui Madrid side would look like. As you mentioned, he started Nacho over Varane, which took a lot of people by surprise. We wanted to see how they'd cope in the post-Ronaldo era. We want to see if Gareth Bale will grow into the more bigger leadership role, I guess, within the front three. But there were other players in there that really impressed me. I thought Marco Asensio had a fantastic game in particular. He looked like he's taken the mantle of that little bit of extra space in the front three on his shoulders really, really easily. Bale, I think we obviously expected of it, but it's someone like Asensio who wanted to see take that next step up in Ronaldo's absence.
And your 2 points merge, because you want to see a Lopetegui team, you want to understand style, and you say Asensio played well with a good make for Bale, a shot off the post, but generally a quite sprightly performance. But the thing that you need to focus on is in the lead up to Gareth Bale's goal, Lopetegui wants his team to press, not in the way that, when we talk about pressing, there are varieties of pressing. Where on the pitch? How many players? For how long? 3 seconds or permanently to get the ball back? There are varieties, but Lopetegui wants his team to have the ball for as much of the match as possible, and then to be protagonists with it, to use it, and not horizontally and diagonally like Pep does to move players around. Lopetegui is pretty keen on the ball to be processed forward as quickly as possible once they win it. However, if you look back, or if anybody that is listening to you tonight and off the ball hasn't seen that game, and they can look back either on 11 Sports or YouTube, however you choose, what you can see is that when Gene, the Togoan defender, picks up the ball on the edge of his own box, completely unpressurised, Asensio is 22 metres away and should have no chance of making a press. And okay, when he's pressed, Gene makes a mistake. But you see Asensio do things that will elevate him and will make his coach pleased, because we know that he's quick. We know that he's got a thunderous shot. We know that he's got a certain capacity for being Mr. Big Moment. He does arrive in the big moments. That's been a note of his career. But to listen to the coach, Richie, and say, I understand what Lopetegui wants, and to run and chase down a terribly athletic defender, rob him and set up the goal when it should have been a nil chance of turning that into possession, never mind possession and a goal. That was a mark, a real watermark of the Asensio-Lopetegui Real Madrid relationship, at least as far as the coach wants it to continue.
And even from an attacking perspective, to see Carvajal get that goal, brilliant headed goal from near the edge of the area, and Sergio Ramos had there was a shout for a penalty. Ultimately VAR came into play, and it looked like that chance was going to be chalked off anyway. But it's nice to see that in those positions his defenders can offer goals and offer a threat.
I'm really like, everybody should know we didn't rehearse this. I really like you went to Carvajal in particular, because it was a good fortune of mine that in Krasnodar with the Spain team as a TV producer, you get to watch much more of training than you ever do in La Liga. La Liga gives you 15 minutes. Not La Liga, pardon me. Real Madrid and Barcelona give you a maximum 15 minutes. So in Spain, you could see what Lopetegui initially, then Hierro, but particularly Lopetegui before he was sacked, gave the players a lot of head tennis. And he would deliberately choose 2 Barca players against 2 Real Madrid players, which gave it an edge. It was fun to watch, but also it showed you their technique, particularly with chest control, head control, placement of headers. Now in head tennis, the exact action that you saw Carvajal do, one of the weirdest men on the pitch, to open his shoulders to follow the ball, and he used tremendous neck muscles to lob the ball back over David Soria for that goal. That was a really neat piece of skill. And while all players have to head the ball so with such balance and with such direction and timing comes from the head tennis that I've seen them play time and time again. I'm certain with clubs, certainly Barcelona made a huge deal of it in the Ronaldinho Deco era as Messi was coming through. A little bit less so now. But the Spain players used that a lot under Lopetegui. And bingo, there was a prize back to the coach for having spent time on telling the players to play that, because Carvajal's finish was gorgeous. And it opened the game at 1-0, broke down a very defensive and a little bit, they were lacking cojones, Getafe. There's no doubt second half they showed that they could have tested the European champions much more, Richie, but the coach got it wrong, Bordalas, in his setup about how to get after Real Madrid.
How much time are we talking to towards the head tennis? I'm kind of curious about, when you see those little training setups.
It's so fascinating because they were training in 45-degree heat, and these sessions that I'm talking about would either be 10, 11 in the morning or maybe 7 o'clock at night. So the heat was pretty full. Now, he'd work them through training regimes, he'd work them through mini games. There'd be the jogging, the stretching, the warming up. There'd be some fun games. But he would consistently detach 4 players off, right, you go and play head tennis. 4 players off, you go and play head tennis. Now, if a game wasn't won, just like in tennis, if the killer header for the point wasn't won, these head tennis games could easily go on 20 minutes, and then the next 4, then the next 4, and the next 4, and they were taken very, very seriously indeed. Yeah. And that's a great trick of any coach. If you can lose your players in the thing that they're doing, then whether they accept the purpose of it or not becomes irrelevant, because they're getting into it and they're giving everything. And in that small instance, all I'm able to do is draw a line of connection between something the coach asked them to do. They enjoyed it, they got good at it, and lo and behold, and listen, several of the players could have done that, and maybe there are players sitting at home going, sure, I'd have finished that one myself. Okay, fine. I saw it at the Bernabeu. It was beautiful technique. I really admired the way. I really enjoyed the finish. I felt sorry for Soria, debutant goalkeeper who had previously never been beaten in his matches against Real Madrid. He had a pretty good game. He has one slightly duff punch, which goes a reasonable distance, and still Carvajal's waiting at the edge of the box to knock it back over him.
Gareth Bale had a really good game though, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought so. I still believe firmly that there's much, much more to come from him, because I think that it's Jekyll and Hyde. It's good for him he's had a summer off. I'm certain he'd have loved Wales to be in Russia and leading them to knockout games or whatever, but he didn't. He had a summer off. Physically, I think that's quite good for him. But because he's a very specific physical phenomenon, I think that arrival to him being able to play 90, 95 minutes at the level that we saw, that you saw and you admired for 65, 70 minutes, I think that's still to come. The things I'd pick up to support your argument is that he's now finally allowed to patrol the front line. So whether he starts right or left, like left is where I've been arguing for many years that he should have been given the privilege of playing on the left-hand side instead of Ronaldo, who wanted to drift inside anyway, but Ronaldo wouldn't allow him to do so. Where does the first goal come from? Well, it comes from Bale's cross from the left that Benzema goes in with Soria, and the Carvajal goal results. When he scores second post, he's playing on the right. When he crushes that header off the bar, a beautiful header, diving gracefully, really powerful. Where does he score from? The penalty spot. He's somebody who likes to play in and around the penalty spot. He's not a 9, but he has the instincts of a 9. Where did he score that wonderful goal in Kiev from the centre of the edge of the area? Bale is a player who has, for many years, including his latter couple of seasons at Tottenham, understood a lot about space, about movement, about where to expose players, even before you talk about his brilliant skill, aerial ability, pace, all of that. He's a really intelligent footballer, I think. So when the elements come together of the freedom he's been given, the responsibility that's on his shoulders, and the fact that he's a little bit more match fit, yeah, I expect him to have a dominant effect this season.
I want to ask you about the transfer window, because obviously, unlike in the Premier League, we're actually going to keep clipping on here until the 31st of August, which gives a little bit of wiggle room for teams to kind of add to their squad. Now, what I thought was remarkable, I was looking through the starting 11s for both Barcelona and Real Madrid from last weekend, and I don't think either one of them really featured any new signings from the off, at least, and there were some involved off the bench. There seems to be a sense that much like the one guy from the Yakuza on the lawn in The Simpsons when the gang warfare kicks off. Homer says, that guy out there, he hasn't done anything yet, but you know when he does, he's going to do something special. There's a sense about Real Madrid that they could still have one giant rabbit to pull out of the hat here.
You see, you drop the ball, you have a great chance. If you're going to a Simpsons reference, if you're reaching, groundskeeper Willie mentions Aberdeen so many times in The Simpsons. But if you want to go back to Japanese organised crime, then that's okay with me because I feel comfortable there.
You see, he was all dressed in a white suit as well, Graeme, so it works on many levels.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I buy your metaphor because Courtois will begin to play regularly. I'm a great Keylor Navas fan, and I suspect that what will happen is a division of labour between League and Cup. How that falls, I'm not certain, but I suspect it'll fall to Courtois League and Keylor Cups, including Europe, I think. But there'll be a division of labour. And you'll notice that Courtois is there. He's a different keeper from Keylor in terms of his attributes, his experience, his age. He's also generically not exactly the same as... he's a much less reactive, much more dominant, forceful keeper. That will make a difference. Vinicius on the tour showed enough to say that he's going to be electric, that he's going to scare certain defenders. And there's already some hysterical skirt grabbing by the Madrid media saying, well, you know, everybody's worried why Vinicius isn't featuring him in the Super Cup of the league. They've had one Super Cup game against their bitter rivals, Atleti, who are brutal to play against, and they've had one game in the league and he hasn't featured, and suddenly it's a to-do. Well, forget that. Vinicius is 18, Brazilian, talented, quick, and will feature gradually, and Lopetegui doesn't need to be in a hurry for him. Barcelona's a different case, and I agree with you. I'm interested that the way I'd have looked at it is it was really surprising that Coutinho started on the bench. That took me aback, I have to say. The idea of Semedo at right back having gained enough that Sergio Roberto plays in midfield and Coutinho doesn't. Okay, Sergio Roberto in midfield I can see, but with Coutinho on the left-hand side, and Coutinho coming on broke the game for Football Club Barcelona and broke Alaves. If you'd like a little tinkle of the keys about the new guys at Football Club Barcelona, I think we're going to have a great deal of recognisable football from Artur Melo, the Brazilian, because he looks as if he came through the same school as Xavi and Iniesta does. He's not a replica of either of them, but he knows about space, pass triangles, moving the ball forward. It's an encouraging beginning, no doubt about that at all.
But the worry from a Barcelona perspective is that they now have to pay 41 million for the players that they would have produced for nothing in the last 10, 15 years.
Oh, man, if you want to get on the mismanagement of La Masia and the discarding of philosophy by Cruyff, then, yeah, we could have all night on it. But you don't solve that with a click of the fingers. During the tour, they did produce Ricky Puig, who's come through the Cantera, the youth system, who played in America, who will have first-team time this season, even though he's in 18, and he's a talent. Miranda will play as backup left-back to Jordi Alba. I'm not countering your point because your point's good, but this summer is actually the first time for a long time there's been a hint that maybe graduates will come through and doff their cap. But Arturo Vidal, even though he barely played, there was a cameo that fascinated me because there's no question they've signed a warrior. There's no question they've signed a guy who's been a leading footballer. There's no question that they've signed somebody who thinks he's got something to prove still and prove it against Madrid, because he feels and keeps saying over and over again, Madrid robbed us twice in the Champions League. So that's all very interesting if you're a Barca fan. But one of the things against him, of two, would be he is reputed to be something of a character off the pitch, if you can accept that euphemism.
Ever so slightly, yeah.
And he, my Italian friend who knew him when he was at Juve would say that the masseurs would have him in post-match recuperation with, he'd be sitting up on the massage table. There'd be two masseurs, one doing each leg. He'd have a tablet in one hand, big screen TV in the other, both showing horse racing, and he'd be glancing, if he could, at the racing pages of the Italian sports papers all at the same time. And King Arthur was then very definitely wearing his crown of, yeah, I play and I train, but there are other things that are more important to me in life. And I'll give you this little anecdote.
That sounds remarkably like Kevin Kilban pre-show, by the way, but anyway.
Yeah, you see, I know Kevin, he's going to resent that remark. Kevin, just looking straight at camera, I want to say that was Richie, not me, okay?
I'm being fed lines by Graeme Hunter, yeah.
King Arturo came out to a big round of applause to train during the game against Alaves. The camp now were like, oh yeah, we kind of like the cut of your jib. But as the game wound down, because nobody was sent out to use the whip of the stick to make him warm up properly. He just stood with his hand on his haunches and watched the game while a 31-year-old who's had fitness problems because of a knee injury just stood and watched the game and didn't warm up, didn't feel he needed to. Now, I found that an interesting little cameo. He came on, didn't do much. I think neutrals and Barca fans alike are going to have a little bit of entertainment with Arturo Vidal this season.
Yeah. Finally, this notion of the game being played over in the United States has caused a bit of a ripple, and it's nice to see, I guess, some solidarity between the captains of the La Liga sides in relation to this.
Solidarity because they all belong to the Players' Union. The very much vaunted idea by the media that there was going to be a strike has been knocked back by the captains. They want involvement, they want consultation. I think in life, never mind in football, that's not a bad request. Javier Tebas, the Liga chief, has been doing really dramatically important things for La Liga in terms of its modernisation, in terms of its availability around the world. If there was a misstep, it was not fully involving the protagonists in what is not yet a decision. It's proposed. The American company that wants it are willing to pay big money over 15 years. It's even proposed that the two games that are under debate might be Girona Football Club Barcelona or Betis Football Club Barcelona. Now, if I was a Betis fan, I would damn sure want to have Barca in my lair rather than over in Miami, where you've got a far less chance of turning them over. It's a personal point of view. Whether it happens or not, whether it's beneficial or not, I'm willing to keep my powder dry on. What I think is essential in football as it grows ever more commercial is that, again, it's my point of view, always players and fans and coaches are brought into the consultation process.
Fans seemingly are the ones that are being left behind in all this.
Well, yeah, it's funny you use that phrase, but
I know the overarching scheme is to bring more people and more eyeballs to the league, but
also they're threatening. The word is that they'll pick five. There's nothing like Napoleonic theory. It's a divide and conquer. They're threatening to take 5,000 fans from the clubs involved across to Miami on free charter flights. Now, I think that for the 5,000 to win that lottery, there's going to be a pretty unanimous hand in the air. I don't know if you can see my hand in the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
Divide and rule, Richie. But no, look, it's ever thus. In the moment, while you and I have been reporting on this sport, I think increasingly people asking the fans, bringing them into the decision, even thinking of caring for them broadly has changed of all recognition. Maybe that our fathers, grandfathers will say, well, we weren't treated with much concern. We were just told to pay up and turn up. But when you look to expand, when you look to take new decisions, people will make mistakes. They definitely will. And I'm willing to wait and hear how La Liga explains the idea, explains the process. And at that point, thus far, Richie, the Spanish FA hasn't yet said, yes, we approve of this. So in my point of view, this is still very much a mooted idea, not a guarantee. If the voices are strong enough against it, it may not happen. But it's part of a process that will not stop.
Do we know when we're likely to get a decision on this?
Yeah, I think we thought we knew, but the fact that the Players Association has mobilised so rapidly, met in Madrid, and has said fairly stern things about, why weren't we consulted? We want to be involved. We're not going to immediately call a strike. That's why I say about my powder being dry. I'd rather listen to the captains. The fans, I'm interested in, but I can't involve them in the process. I work with players every day, every week. They matter to me, and it's my peccadillo that generally I think that the footballing authorities, not La Liga, but clubs and FIFA and UEFA, don't care about how much we're squeezing out of the players. This idiotic idea that the World Cup might be increased to, 142,000 teams? If there's a vote, the FIFA president can get from the association to, St Kilda will probably be in it. I'm not certain that people are saying, compare the amount we ask of the footballers, even though we've got dietitians and fitness specialists and recuperation techniques you couldn't dream of 10 or 15 years ago. Still that creative spark. There's no machine to make sure that players have still got that creative spark. They need rest. And in general, I think we're squeezing every last creative and physical drop out of players. Therefore, the consultation with them and and how they move forward in this debate, because what they've said is ball back in your court, La Liga, explain more to us. The moment that I'll take a firm position on it, not that my opinion matters much, but you asked me, will be when I understand what the Players' Union thinks about it.
Graeme, pleasure as always.
Up the dandies.